has a history that dates to the early 1930s, when the quarter was first redesigned to honor the bicentennial of George Washington's birth. By 1988, the design had weathered the Depression, World War II, and the transition from silver to clad composition in 1965. Collectors who focus on modern quarters often praise this era for its clarity in detail and relative abundance. Yet therein lies the paradox. When something is everywhere, the few examples that aren't quite right suddenly command attention. Spotting a rare 1988 quarter starts with knowing exactly what right looks like. In the standard issue, you'll see the familiar outline of Washington's profile, the crisp lettering of Liberty arching above, and the motto, "In God We Trust," to the left. On the reverse, a stately eagle with outstretched wings shields its clutch of arrows, flanked by olive branches. The edges have that classic reeded pattern, and the silver-colored copper-nickel clad rings a clear, bright note when tapped against another coin. But sometimes, one of those elements shifts just enough to catch the eye of an eagle-eyed collector. Among the most celebrated rarities are off-center strikes. Instead of the portrait sitting neatly in the middle, you'll find it creeping toward the rim, sometimes almost half the design missing. A 1988 quarter off-center by more than 10% can be worth $50 to a few $100s, depending on how dramatic the displacement is and how intact the remaining design appears. Less extreme off-centers, say 2 or 3 millimeters, still fetch a premium over face value, particularly in uncirculated grades where luster and detail remain intact. Naturally, condition matters. An MS-65 off-center strike might command a higher bid than a worn, circulated example with the same degree of error. Double-die varieties are another playground for collectors. While most enthusiasts know of celebrated double dies from earlier series, like the 1955 cents, 1988 quarters can also exhibit doubling on the obverse or reverse. You might spot a faint ghost image on the lettering of quarter dollar or slight doubling on Washington's hair strands. These are harder to find and often go unnoticed until a collector examines the coin under magnification. When authenticated by grading services, a genuine double-die Washington quarter from 1988 can fetch anywhere from $100 to $300, based on the prominence of the doubling and overall grade. Then there are clipped planchets, where the blank metal piece was improperly cut before entering the press. On a clipped 1988 quarter, you might see a curved or straight missing section along the rim, sometimes a small arc, sometimes a noticeable crescent. Unlike off-centers, the design remains fully visible but is abruptly truncated. Clipped planchets of this date generally bring in a modest premium, perhaps $20 to $75 in circulated condition, rising higher if the clip is sizable and the coin remains in mint state. These clipped specimens offer a fascinating glimpse into the production line, where a single misfeed can produce a collectible anomaly. Die cracks and die breaks are more subtle, but no less intriguing. Tiny fissures can form on the die after repeated strikes, and those cracks transfer directly onto the coin's surface as thin, raised lines. On a 1988 Washington quarter, you might see these lines radiating around the rim or across Washington's shoulder. Individually, a small die crack might not add much monetary value, perhaps a few dollars over face value, but some collectors pursue lengthy, dramatic cracks that snake across both sides, ensuring a complete and dramatic manifestation of the flaw. Those standout pieces, especially in higher grades, can command a nice bump at auction. Speaking of auctions, the current market tells us how hungry collectors are for these modern oddities. In early 2025, a top-graded, certified MS-67 1988 D off-center quarter sold for over $450, far eclipsing its face value and underscoring the demand for high-grade error coins. Meanwhile, a modest doubled lettering variety, graded MS-65, went for around $175 in a February sale. Clipped planchet examples continue to trade in the $40 to $90 range, depending on the clip size and the coin's overall eye appeal. It's worth checking recent auction catalogs or online platforms, since even slight shifts in collector interest can send prices upward. Now, for those who might stumble upon a 1988 quarter in pocket change, don't rush to the grading service just yet. Most quarters of this date in circulation are worth their 25 cents face value, with slight wear on Washington's cheek and hair. But if the surfaces are brilliant, with sharp luster and no contact marks, an uncirculated MS60 or better, you could have a mint-state piece worth a couple of dollars from a local dealer. Dial in your expectations based on condition. MS62 examples often sell for $2 to $4, while true gem quality MS65 coins might fetch $12 to $18. Condition dictates value more than anything, especially for such a common date. Beyond the numbers, there's something almost poetic about finding one of these errors, a tangible reminder that even the mightiest U.S. mint machinery occasionally stumbles. Reports circulate of casual collectors inadvertently spotting an off-center 1988 in a handful of rolled quarters, turning a mundane transaction at the grocery store into a moment of pure exhilaration. That sense of discovery, holding what looks like change in your palm, only to realize it's a doorway into a niche collecting world, remains the heart of why we hunt these modern oddities. As we wrap this first segment on the 1988 Washington Quarter, keep an eye on your spare change and treat every find as a potential treasure. In our next installment, we'll shift gears and dive into the quirks of the 1979 Quarter, another date full of surprises that even experienced collectors shouldn't overlook. Until then, let those quarters roll, because you never know which one might push the boundary between ordinary pocket change and a coveted rarity. Stepping back from the late 70s and early 80s, our journey lands in 1965, a watershed year when the U.S. Mint waved goodbye to silver and embraced a new copper-nickel-clad composition. That shift transformed every quarter in circulation, but it also opened the door to a host of errors and varieties that still captivate collectors today. Whether you grew up with pockets jangling full of shiny quarters, or you're just sorting through a box of inherited coins, the 1965 issue offers a fascinating snapshot of change, experimentation, and the occasional minting misstep. In early 1965, rising silver prices forced the Treasury to find a cost-effective alternative for small change. The solution was a sandwich of pure copper core between two layers of copper-nickel alloy. Production kicked off quickly at Philadelphia and Denver, and by mid-year, clad quarters were rolling out in astonishing numbers. Unlike earlier silver issues, these new coins bore no mint mark from San Francisco, proof strikes aside, which adds a layer of intrigue for specialty collectors who chase those rare, early proof sets. The familiar John Flanagan portrait remained untouched, but subtle details like the replacement of the silver sheen with a slightly muted tone mark 1965 quarters as the heralds of a new era. Identifying a genuine 1965 clad quarter is usually straightforward under normal light. You'll see the matte gray of nickel-covered copper, faintly warmer around the edges where the core peeks through. The reeded edge feels crisp on uncirculated pieces, while circulated examples often show where that softens the reeds into a smoother band. But beyond everyday specimens, the year spawned an array of errors, some born from the hastened transition between compositions. Planchet lamination errors, where thin pieces of the clad layers peeled away, reveal parallel bands of copper and nickel like geological strata. These lamination flaws typically fetch $10 to $25 in worn grades, rising to $50 or more when the peeling is dramatic on a pristine MS65 example. Off-center strikes also make their presence known in 1965, partly because the machinery was still settling into the new metal flow characteristics. When you encounter an off-center 1965 quarter, look for partial portraits of Washington that drift toward the rim. Dramatic strikes, where more than 20% of the design is missing, can command $75 to $150 in higher grades, while subtler misalignments might trade for $30 to $60 if the surfaces remain unblemished. Condition is king. A gem mint off-center piece in MS66 will always outshine a lower-grade counterpart with the same displacement. Die cracks and die chips tend to be more prolific on the early clad dies, too. You might spot a raised, branching line on the obverse spreading from Washington's jaw or tiny nodules along the reverse rim near the eagle's talons. Collectors often classify these by length and location, a shoulder crack versus a rim break, for instance, with longer, more visible cracks commanding premiums of $20 to $40 even in circulated grades. In top mint states, a spectacular crack stretching from one side of the coin to the other might fetch $100 or more at auction, a small tribute to the die's gradual wear under heavy production loads. Perhaps the most talked about error from this transitional year involves coins struck on silver planchets. While official records don't confirm any large-scale silver trials for quarters in 1965, rumors persist of a handful slipping into circulation. That rumor achieved near-mythic status when a single specimen purportedly surfaced in the 1990s, ringing with a distinctly higher pitch and displaying a pale, steely luster. Authentication remains elusive, and no grading service has definitively certified such a piece. Yet the story fuels late-night chats on collecting forums and keeps hope alive that a genuine silver planchet 1965 quarter will one day break the mold. Mintmark anomalies also pop up, especially with the newly tightened collar adjustments made to accommodate the clad planchet thickness. Some Denver minted coins show faint doubling of the D mint mark, ghost impressions that echo the error minted quarters from later decades. These subtle mint mark varieties often slip under the radar unless examined under bright magnification. Certified examples of a pronounced D over double D can reach $125 to $200 in mint state, while more modest doubling might settle in the $50 to $80 range. Auction records for graded 1965 quarters tell a story of gradual appreciation fueled by collector enthusiasm for modern errors. In March 2025, a PCGS MS67 lamination error sold for $220, beating its pre-sale estimate by nearly 50%. A January auction saw an NGC MS65 Plus off-center strike, with 18% displacement, bring $135, demonstrating how even slightly off-register coins can light a fire under bidders. Meanwhile, common circulated 1965 quarters without noticeable errors generally trade for 25 cents to 50 cents apiece at local shops, an important reminder that condition and error type drive value most of all. Beyond raw numbers, the stories behind these coins add charm. Seasoned dealers recall gently teasing out lamination errors from unsorted lots of clad coins, turning routine bank rolls into small treasure hunts. Amateur collectors share tales of discovering off-center quarters in their wallets after vacations abroad, the thrill of finding an unexpected anomaly far outweighing its modest market price. These personal anecdotes, often passed along in club meetings or online groups, underscore why the 1965 quarter remains a staple in both error and modern coin collections. When assessing a 1965 quarter for your own collection, start by cleaning your eyeglass lens or loupe. Clarity is crucial. Examine the rim for planchet flaws, check the full portrait area for off-centering, and scan both sides for tiny hairlines of die cracks. If you spot something unusual, take high-resolution photographs under strong light to share in specialist forums, and consider professional grading for high-grade or bold errors. Even if the coin ends up worth just a few dozen dollars, the process of verification and the story you uncover will enrich your collecting journey far beyond face value. As we close out our exploration of these three quarters, the modern oddities of 1988, the dazzling varieties of 1979, and the transformative errors of 1965, remember that each coin serves as a tiny time capsule. They bear witness to historical shifts, minting milestones, and the unscripted moments when machines faltered. Whether you're a veteran collector with a finely tuned error coin radar or someone sorting loose change for the first time, the thrill of discovery remains the same. Keep those eyes peeled, and you might just find your next prized piece in a pocketful of everyday commerce. Shifting gears from the 1988 off-center wonders, let's travel back almost a decade to 1979, a year when the Washington quarter design was so ubiquitous that few paused to appreciate its subtleties. Yet beneath its familiar profile lies a world of die varieties, mint marks, and subtle missteps that keep seasoned collectors scanning rolls with undiminished excitement. The 1979 quarter might feel like a staple in your change jar, but that very commonality makes its rarer siblings all the more alluring. The story of the 1979 Washington quarter begins amid economic turbulence. The U.S. Mint struck hundreds of million pieces that year at both Philadelphia, no mint mark, and Denver, Mark D, responding to growing demand as coin shortages lingered from the mid-1970s. With John Flanagan classic portrait unchanged, the quarter had become an icon, circulating alongside newly released Susan B. Anthony dollars by the end of that year. Most 1979 quarters are clad copper-nickel, identical to their 1965 onward counterparts, but the sheer volume produced, over 1 billion total, belies the hidden curiosities waiting to be found. When examining a 1979 quarter for rarity, start with mint mark position and die polishing lines. Denver issues sometimes exhibit a faint horizontal die polishing scratch above Washington's head on the obverse. In circulated grades, this hairline, thin line may go unnoticed, but in mint state specimens it stands out sharply under low magnification. Collectors prize these hairlines because they mark the final cleaning of the die before mass production, a fleeting moment captured on metal. When certified, a boldly defined die polish line can boost a coin's value from a standard MS-63 price of roughly $2.50 to $10 to $15 in MS-65, depending on how striking that line appears. One of the more dramatic rarities is the 1979 D over horizontal bar mint mark variety. During die preparation at Denver, a misplaced punch from a previous project left residual mint mark impressions that were partially doubled when used to stamp that year's quarters. On affected coins, a faint second D hovers just below the main mint mark, creating a ghost image that's often invisible to the naked eye. Under a loupe, though, the doubling becomes undeniable, and certified examples can fetch $75 to $125 in mid-grade circulated conditions. Uncirculated specimens with pronounced doubling and full luster soared to $300 to $450 at a January 2025 auction, proof that a subtle shift in minting can create serious collector frenzy. Die breaks also play a starring role in 1979 errors. On some Philadelphia coins, you'll find a distinctive die crack snaking from the rim across Washington's neck into the field. Collectors have dubbed certain specimens neck crack, quarters, and serious enthusiasts seek out long, continuous cracks that form near-complete loops around the portrait. A lengthy, uninterrupted crack on an MS-64 coin might sell for $50, while a monumental break running edge to edge, graded MS-66, can command upwards of $200. The combination of dramatic visual appeal and the story of die makes these cracks more than minor blemishes. They're the fingerprint of a production machine under duress. Clipped planchets and off-center strikes make appearances in 1979 as well, though they tend to be rarer than the die-based errors. A typical 1979 quarter missing a neat crescent along its rim may be the result of a planchet feed issue, worth $30 to $75 in circulated grades. Off-center strikes exceeding 15% displacement often draw more attention, especially when the denomination remains readable and the date is fully present on the clipped side. Those bold misalignments, when certified in mint state, can fetch $150 to $250 at specialized error coin auctions, underlining the premium placed on dramatic mishaps. Perhaps the most intriguing story involves the 1979 quarter that accidentally received a silver planchet from an experimental trial. Though never officially documented, rumors circulated among error coin communities in the early 2000s of a handful of these treated test blanks slipping into circulation. Silver planchet quarters would ring with a distinctly higher pitch and display a pale gray sheen unlike the typical copper-nickel color. To date, no authenticated specimen has surfaced publicly, but collectors remain vigilant, knowing that a single verified example would send shockwaves and six-figure bids through the numismatic world. Turning to market values, the current scene shows steady interest in high-grade die varieties. On average, a clean MS-65 1979P without notable errors trades in the $4 to $6 range, while an MS-67 specimen can approach $30 at auctions. Denver coins often fetch a slight premium, especially if the die polish line is pronounced. Certified error coin registry sales from late 2024 reported in 1979 D over horizontal bar, double die graded EF45 selling for $110, and a remarkable MS68 neck crack variety for $220. Auction platforms like Heritage and eBay remain prime hunting grounds. Just remember to factor in grading fees and buyer's commission when calculating potential investment returns. For the backyard treasure hunter stumbling upon a 1979 quarter in circulation, the odds heavily favor a standard, face value piece with worn rims and softened detail. Yet lingering luster or crisp vertices on Washington's hair could signal an uncirculated coin worth holding onto. At local coin shops, dealers often price MS-63, MS-64 quarters in the $2 to $3 bracket, while gem uncirculated MS-66 examples might be tagged at $12 to $18. The moral of the story? Always check both sides under good light and magnification, and don't dismiss a slightly off-kilter detail. Stories from the collecting trenches reinforce why 1979 quarters remain a perennial favorite. One veteran collector recounts finding a D over horizontal bar variety in a roll of Denver quarters purchased by chance, turning a casual weekend hunt into a headline-worthy discovery. Another describes the thrill of winning a neck-crack specimen at a tiny regional auction, paying just $45 before realizing its true pedigree. These anecdotes echo a central truth. Even the most common coin can conceal a numismatic gem, rewarding patience and a keen eye. As you tuck away that next 1979 quarter, remember that its value hinges on both condition and era rarity. Whether you're drawn to mint-mark anomalies, die cracks, or the tantalizing possibility of an experimental planchet, this humble coin year offers a surprisingly rich landscape of collecting opportunities. In our final segment, we'll fast forward to the 1965 quarter, where the nation's shift from silver to clad composition forged a whole new chapter of modern anomalies. Prepare to uncover the quirks that emerged when the mint said farewell to silver and hello to clad coinage. We're about to peel back the layers of minting quirks, clutch onto auction highlights, and explore how grading can send value soaring. Stick around, because the story of this 1988 issue isn't just about silver content or face value. It's about the thrill of discovery that comes with spotting an error few collectors ever notice. It all began in 1988, the U.S. Mint's second year issuing clad quarters without silver content, a decision rooted in cost-saving measures and evolving public demand. Even as copper-nickel composition took over, the Mint kept the Washington quarter design largely unchanged, George's profile still dominating the obverse, and the heraldic eagle on the reverse, wings spread, clutching arrows and an olive branch. Yet right here, in this transitional phase, is where minting idiosyncrasies crept in. Blank planchets, grease contamination, and misaligned dies sometimes combined to yield anomalies. Collectors who appreciate the nuance of modern mint errors know that sometimes the simplest designs produce the most intriguing misstrikes. Tracking this quarter's origin story leads straight to the Denver and Philadelphia mints, marked with a small D or no mint mark at all for Philly pieces. Most 1988 quarters rolled out without incident, destined for change machines and the inevitable friction of pocket life. However, quality control wasn't infallible. A handful of planchets bore lamination flaws, layers of the copper-nickel sandwich separating ever so slightly, creating raised edges or flaking spots. At other times, striking pressure varied just enough to leave ghostly doubling on letters and numerals, a classic double die error. These subtle quirks are the stepping stones that usher a common quarter into the realm of rarity. Now, what makes that misalignment or planchet fault elevate the 1988 quarter status? Collectors prize consistency and perfection in modern issues, so any deviation from the standard becomes a beacon for eyes trained in precision. The lamination splits might only affect a few thousand pieces out of the millions produced, but those few are the ones that survive inspection and enter circulation virtually unnoticed. Double die obverse, with slightly thicker lines on Liberty or a subtly duplicated date, draw even more attention. It's the interplay of scarcity, visual appeal, and market demand that transforms these mint hiccups into collector gold. Turning to current market values, a circulation strike 1988 quarter without errors generally fetches its face value or just above. Yet on auction floors, certified examples displaying clear lamination flake or dramatic doubling have leapt into the low hundreds. Notable sales include a PCGS MS 65 plus lamination error quarter that went for just over $350 in late 2023, and an NGC-certified double-die obverse piece that commanded nearly $500 earlier this year. These figures may climb as awareness grows, especially among collectors focused on post-1964 clad issues, which have seen a surge in niche interest and hobbyist investment. Beyond the numbers, there's a human element woven into these coins' journeys. One collector recounted finding a small stack of 1988 quarters in an old cigar box inherited from his grandfather. Among them was a coin displaying an off-center strike so dramatic that the date sat partially in the rim. That find sparked a lifelong passion for error collecting and eventually led him to trade for a complete set of bicentennial error halves. Stories like that remind us that, while grading and auction catalogs matter, the thrill of discovery often starts with a serendipitous moment and a knowing glance under a loupe. When it comes to condition, the gulf between mint state and circulated examples could not be more pronounced. A pristine MS 67 traffic stopping lamination error quarter might command 5 or 6 times the price of a similar error in XF 45 grade, where wear has dulled the split layer or softened the doubled lines. In circulated grades, dark toning can sometimes accentuate lamination flakes, creating a dramatic appearance that appeals to eye catchers. Yet heavy scratches or rim nicks will invariably knock several tiers off the price ladder. For those hunting slab treasures, aiming for MS 63 or higher is key. Below that, you risk paying premiums for details that wear obscures. As you handle a 1988 quarter under magnification, pay attention to how the planchet surface interacts with light. A crisp die doubling on the obverse, "In God We Trust," will show crisp, parallel bands. Lamination flaws will lift in ragged crescents along the periphery. Learning to spot these traits in pocket change can turn casual coin checking into a rewarding routine. It's a blend of patience, technique, and that spark of curiosity that keeps seasoned collectors scanning every roll. By exploring these minor yet meaningful variations, you tap into a corner of numismatics where discovery remains ripe and potential value lingers just beneath the surface. Whether you're an avid error enthusiast or someone uncovering these quirks for the first time, the 1988 Washington quarter holds more than just the imprint of a founding father. It carries the story of minting transitions, manufacturing imperfections, and the collector spirit that transforms everyday change into prized artifacts. Keep your eyes peeled, your loupe ready, and your passion burning, because the next remarkable find might just be a flip away. Sliding from the quirks of 1988 right into the subtler oddities of its immediate predecessor, the 1987 Washington quarter hides its own set of surprises beneath that familiar profile of a founding father. As production ramped up to meet growing change demands, the U.S. Mint still grappled with the margins of perfection. Hunt for a 1987 clad quarter, and you might stumble on anomalies that slipped past quality checks. A faint doubling here, a misplaced mint mark there, or a layer peel that gives the coin an unexpectedly dramatic edge. It's in those imperfect details that 5 decades of demand for modern errors find fertile ground. Produced in vast quantities across Philadelphia and Denver, the 1987 issue marks a moment when the clad composition, pure copper core sandwiched by nickel, was already well established. The mint's machinery hummed through hundreds of millions of planchets, but high-speed presses and tight tolerances don't guarantee absolute uniformity. A careless piece of grease coating the die could translate into a die clash, where metal from one working surface embeds into another. What results is a whisper of extra lines or ghostly impressions echoing George Washington's haircut or the motto, E pluribus unum. Any collector worth their loupe knows that Philadelphia pieces carry no mint mark, while Denver examples proudly bear the tiny D just above the bow on the reverse. Yet mint marks themselves didn't escape the era's hiccups. A handful of coins show what specialists call a weak D, where insufficient striking pressure left the letter faint or incomplete. Those subtle variances draw keen-eyed collectors who track mint mark's strength across issues. A bold, sharply struck D in MS 65 grade may pull in a modest premium, but a barely there mint mark, sitting like a whisper on the coin's surface, can be vastly more elusive. Among the most sought-after anomalies for this year is the infamous bow tie die crack. Early in Denver's 1987 run, A minute fracture in the reverse die's ribbon area spread with each strike, creating a zigzag fissure that resembles a tiny bow tie tucked under the eagle's arrow clutches. In circulated coins, this crack can be overlooked or worn smooth. Under a grade of EF 40, it might be nothing more than a faint line. However, in high grades, where fields remain polished and devices crisp, that crack stands out in stark relief, enough to propel value from mere face value into the low hundreds when encapsulated by PCGS or NGC. Prices for a standard, flawless 1987 quarter run just above face value, with raw mint state examples trading for $2 or $3 apiece. Yet error variants command far more attention. A PCGS MS 66 Plus with a pronounced die crack sold for $275 in mid-2024, while an NGC certified MS 65 showing subtle doubling on quarter dollar fetched $190 in a spring auction. Layer splitting faults, where the nickel layer lifts to expose the rosy copper core, have seen bids pushing $150 for sharply defined examples. Tracking auction archives and dealer lists reveals a clear pattern. The rarer the error and the higher the grade, the wider the gap from pocket change to prized artifact. Peeling back another layer of stories, collectors recount how these cracked reverses sometimes reveal themselves in the oddest places. One enthusiast discovered his prize in a forgotten box of mixed-date quarters purchased at a garage sale. His 1987 quarter, struck with that bow tie crack and boasting lightly toned fields, sparked a flurry of offers that ended in a trade for a near-complete run of bicentennial halves. His find reinforces a simple truth. Keeping even the most mundane pocket change under occasional scrutiny can yield a dramatic payoff. Digging deeper into condition-related valuations, an MS 67 bow tie crack quarter remains a unicorn. Only a handful are known and slabbed. Such specimens have driven hammer prices over $500 at specialty error coin auctions, where passionate bidders recognize that extreme rarity merits steep premiums. Drop even a grade or two to MS 64, and you still see coins comfortably crossing the $200 threshold. In comparison, circulated grades show more nuance. An XF 45 with a clear die line might clear $50, but AG 3 pieces sell for little more than face value, the crack all but erased by years of wear. The magic lies not only in the crack. Double die obverse from this year remain an underappreciated category. A subtle double stroke on Liberty or In God We Trust can lurk in plain sight until caught under magnification. The effect is delicate and easily mistaken for die polishing remnants. Yet certified examples by PCGS and NGC show that only a few thousand at most bear this trait. Those collectors who specialize in doubled dies often pay premiums of 3 to 5 times the basal value of a standard quarter. There's also the tale of this satin finish trial piece, a lone example rumored to have emerged from the Philadelphia Mint's experimental vaults. Unlike the typical proof-like or business strikes, this experimental strike purportedly exhibits a satiny sheen across both obverse and reverse, without the mirror fields or frosted devices of a proof coin. Its existence remains a whispered legend among specialists. No slabbed satin trial, 1987 quarter, has ever surfaced for public sale. Yet the story underscores collector fascination with anything that deviates from the norm. As you cradle a 1987 quarter under your loupe, watch for variation in toning as well. Natural toning can accentuate die cracks, lending them a golden brown halo that contrasts with remaining silver-white fields. Graders note that eye appeal and toned error coins can fetch higher prices, provided the toning is even and free of corrosive spots. That delicate balance of error visibility and aesthetic charm explains why some toned error quarters trade even higher than their untuned counterparts, particularly when the coloration frames, rather than obscures, the defining anomaly. For anyone entrenched in modern error collecting, the 1987 Washington quarter represents both a familiar battlefield and a frontier of untapped potential. Whether you're drawn by the drama of the bow tie die crack, the intrigue of weak mint marks, or the subtle allure of doubled dies and layer splits, this issue rewards persistence. Sifting through rolls, peering at each face under oblique light, and tracking auction archives are all part of the journey. The payoff isn't just monetary. It's the thrill of revealing stories that unfolded beneath a steam-pressed die over 30 years ago. In the end, a single 1987 clad quarter can connect you to a hidden chapter of U.S. mint production, a moment when speed and precision battled imperfections, and when each missed strike carried the potential to ignite a collector's passion. Keep an eye trained on your change. Let curiosity guide your search. And remember that the next remarkable find could slip into your palm at any moment, waiting for a discerning gaze to unlock its true worth. Stepping back to 1980, you might assume that by then clad quarters had smoothed out most production kinks. But a closer look reveals this year's issue bristling with its own set of rare varieties. As the U.S. Mint balanced pressing demand with evolving error detection techniques, a handful of oddities slipped through the cracks. Whether caught in rolls destined for vending machines or tucked away in collectors' archives, these 1980 quarters offer a tantalizing treasure hunt for anyone willing to peer beneath that familiar eagle's wings. The story began at two bustling facilities: Philadelphia, striking coins without a mint mark, and Denver, stamping the tiny D on pieces that would bank the nation's change. Production numbers soared, nearly 500 million from Philly and just over that from Denver, but sheer volume didn't guarantee perfection. In 1980, the mint still wrestled with planchet flaws, grease spots, and die stress, creating the perfect conditions for both subtle and dramatic errors to appear. Even seasoned collectors sometimes stumble upon anomalies they didn't expect in this seemingly straightforward year. One of the most talked about features from 1980 is the broad strike error, where the collar that normally limits a quarter's diameter failed to secure the planchet. Without that restraint, the metal spread outward under pressure, yielding an oversized coin with a smooth, collarless edge. On a circulated broad strike, you might notice the rim is noticeably thinner and flatter, with lettering that hugs the periphery in a washed-out line. In mint state, the effect is startling: a crisp eagle with wings that almost touch the rim, as if the design itself expanded beyond its intended frame. Collectors prize broad strikes not only for their visual drama, but also for their scarcity. Estimates suggest only a few thousand broad-struck 1980 quarters escaped the mint's backdoor, making them far rarer than the standard issues. Auction records confirm this. A PCGSMS 64 broad strike from Philadelphia sold for $420 in late 2024, while a Denver broad strike in MS 65 fetched $525 just months later. These numbers underscore how a single manufacturing hiccup can transform a humble quarter into a standout rarity. Layer splitting or lamination errors also show up when that copper-nickel sandwich of clad planchets doesn't bond properly. In 1980, variations in temperature and core composition occasionally led to thin layers peeling away, creating raised foils or flaked regions that gleamed differently under angled light. These flaws may present as a small, crescent-shaped ribbon of exposed copper or as a larger delamination patch across the coin's face. In either case, the effect is unmistakable, catching the eye of anyone examining change with a loupe. A circulated 1980 lamination error quarter might only command $30 to $50, depending on the size and location of the split. Yet in mint state, where fields remain untouched, premiums rise swiftly. An NGCMS 66 lamination error quarter brought $310 at auction in February, while an MS 67 example topped $450 in a spring collector's sale. Condition dictates value more sharply here than with broad strikes, since any scratching or rim nicks can obscure the split and dampen its appeal. Another exciting variant involves the mint mark placement on Denver-struck quarters. On rare occasions, the tiny D that belongs centered above the bow on the reverse ribbon dipped ever so slightly, resting closer to the letter A in quarter. At first glance, the mint mark placement might seem negligible, but collectors identify these off-center mint marks as distinct subtypes. A clear, well-centered misplacement in MS 65 sells for around $150, while a sharply struck, dramatically shifted mint mark graded MS 66 has crossed the $300 threshold. Die cracks and die breaks also make their presence felt on 1980 quarters. As dies age, they develop fissures that imprint on subsequent strikes, sometimes yielding lines that trace across the obverse or reverse in jagged patterns. The most notable 1980 die crack runs from George Washington's neck into the letter R of Liberty, creating a spiderweb-like effect in high grades. Certified pieces showcasing this crack in MS 64 or higher can change hands for $200 or more, particularly when the lines remain bold rather than worn thin by circulation. The tale of a legendary 1980 double die reverse persists among hardcore error enthusiasts. Supposedly, some quarters showcase a faint doubling of eagle feathers and ribbon scrolls, hinting at die rotation mishaps or misalignments during hubbing. While no such coin has yet been slabbed by major services, whispered rumors from die hunting communities keep hope alive. If one surfaces, expect bidding wars that dwarf current auction records for more established 1980 anomalies. Beyond mechanical errors, another dimension of value emerges through coin toning. Natural toning on 1980 quarters can range from subtle amber highlights along the rim to deep blue-green patinas stretching across fields. On error coins, toning can dramatize flaws, highlighting the expanded edges of broad strikes or accentuating the contrast between nickel and copper in lamination splits. Collectors often pay extra for error coins with eye-catching toning, provided the hues are uniform and free of corrosive spotting. Of course, condition remains king. A raw, ungraded error quarter might intrigue pocket change spelunkers, but submission to PCGS or NGC can vault value into collectible territory. For broad strikes and lamination errors, aim for MS 65 or higher to secure attention from serious buyers. In lower grades, negative 55 Australian dollars or XF 40, the same broad strike might trade for $80 and a lamination flaw for $25. Yet, even in worn conditions, these errors hold more allure than typical circulation strikes, maintaining a steady premium over face value. Scouring rolls for 1980 quarters can feel like searching for a needle in a haystack, but modern tools make the hunt manageable. High-resolution photographs of known errors are readily available online, helping collectors train their eyes. A simple flip under an angled LED light can reveal broad strike expansions or lamination ridges. For mint-mark shifts and die cracks, a 5x loop often suffices, doubling hunt's benefit from 10x magnification to tease out subtle die rotations. If you're assembling an error-focused collection, the 1980 Washington quarter stands as a prime candidate. Its anomalies span a spectrum from dramatic to elusive, catering to both visual thrill seekers and die-centric specialists. With market interest in modern errors climbing steadily, securing a high-grade broad strike or lamination split now could yield substantial appreciation over the coming years. More than just change, these coins encapsulate the story of a mint grappling with mass production, quality control, and the enduring allure of imperfection. In the end, holding a 1980 error quarter connects you to a moment when mechanical precision met human oversight, when molten planchets cooled and pressed against steel dies, occasionally revealing the mint's hidden hand. Every broad strike hint, every lamination peel, every misplaced mint mark whispers a story. For collectors over 40 who cherish history etched in metal, these quarters offer an invitation. Keep exploring, keep inspecting, because the next extraordinary find may be riding along in your spare change. Quietly slipped through the cracks of mass production and now fetches prices far beyond its face value. Back in 1972, the United States Mint was rolling out billions of Washington quarters, marking the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth just 3 years earlier. Demand for circulating coinage was surging, and the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints were all churning out change day and night. Unlike the bicentennial quarters of 1975 to 76, these 1972 issues carried the classic obverse design by John Flanagan, with Washington's profile facing left and the mottos we all know stamped boldly. It's easy to overlook a single year in this vast sea of metal, but that's exactly why a handful of rare errors managed to slip away, turning everyday coins into treasured museum pieces on someone's shelf. What makes the 1972 quarter truly stand out is its error variety, especially the famous double die obverse examples from the Philadelphia Mint. On these coins, you'll notice doubling around the words Liberty and In God We Trust, almost like an echo or ghost image slightly offset from the primary lettering. Under a simple loop, those letters seem to carry a whisper of themselves behind the bold strokes, and that subtle imperfection can drive a collector wild. Then there's the low mintage proof issues from San Francisco, often mistaken for regular business strikes until you see the mirror-like fields and frosted devices sparkle under a bright light. In terms of market value, a pristine 1972 DDR double die reverse specimen graded MS65 or higher by a top-tier service like PCGS frequently commands anywhere from $500 to over $1,500 at auction. Higher grades, MS67 and above, can push the price into the $2,000 to $3,500 range, owing to their extreme rarity in that condition. Meanwhile, uncirculated regular strikes from Denver and Philadelphia in grades like MS63 typically fetch $40 to $60. But once you hit that MS65 milestone, you're looking at $150 to $200 or more. And proof coins? A flawless PR70 from San Francisco can break the $300 threshold, simply because a perfect coin of any type from 1972 is quite the unicorn. But don't let these numbers fool you into thinking every 1972 quarter is a ticket to easy money. Many standard business strikes filled pocket change over the decades and now show considerable wear, with rims nibbled by circulation and details softened by time. A well-worn 1972 no-mint mark quarter will trade for just its face value plus a modest premium, around 35 to 50 cents, unless it displays some sort of error or unusual coloration. It's all about condition. The jump from VF, very fine, to EF, extremely fine, might double a coin's premium, while the leap into mint state territory can multiply its worth tenfold. Beyond grading and error identification, there are a handful of quirky stories that make this coin even more collectible. One anecdote tells of a small-time convenience store owner in rural Ohio who used a stash of 1972 double-die quarters as part of his golden ticket promotion, slipping them at random into change orders. Word got out, and local collectors descended on his shop every weekend, hoping to score a rarer-than-rare prize. In another corner of the hobby, an eBay seller once claimed to have found a 1972 D-proof quarter in a roll of business strikes, though seasoned dealers quickly debunked the story, showing that true proofs from Denver that year never entered general circulation. When you examine two 1972 quarters side by side, the difference is startling. A coin graded MS60 at a major service looks dusty and flat. Its luster is muted, and the devices lack sharp contrast. But slide in an MS67 example, and you see a gleaming masterpiece. Every hair on Washington's head catches the light. The eagle's feathers on the reverse look sculpted, and the fields glow like liquid mercury. That optical magic can mean tens of thousands of dollars in total auction records for the very best pieces. Just ask the collector who shelled out $4,375 for a PCGS MS67 plus 1972 DDR last November. Of course, condition isn't the only factor. Some of the most extraordinary 1972 quarters show rare die varieties beyond doubling. Think off-center strikes, clipped planchets, or filled dies that create ghost-like impressions of the design. Each of these quirks tells a story about the chaos and complexity of mass minting operations. A clipped planchet, for instance, speaks of a misaligned blank on the cutting machine, a